My name is Kino Loy. I'm the day shift manager on level 5. I'm speaking to you from the command center on level 8. We are, at this moment, in control of the facility.
Is that the best you got?
All right, today we're going to talk about Andor, and we're going to talk about the overall story structure of Andor and what makes it so different and sets it apart from everything else from there. So, most stories will follow a fairly central focal point from here. What I mean by that is what happens, what do we show in there? So what we'll have is we'll have a sort of main character, and this acts as a number of things. This is the point of view for everything. This is kind of the moral lens for everything like that. Because when the main character is looking at something, we're kind of waiting for them and waiting for a cue from them to see how to react ourselves. As an audience, we are very susceptible. This is, the whole point between laugh tracks. So when to laugh, when something's funny. The moral lens comes into play when you watch something to see how you react. Is this good? Is this bad from here? This is the reason why propaganda and stuff like that is so jarring, and how it sits so well, evil to some degrees, because you'll watch something and you go, that's bad, and then the main character will say that's good, and it's this really, really, really jarring aspect where you can see this come into play. And so what we've got here, though, is there's kind of a spotlight from here. So what you'll have is you'll have the main character, and this will be the main character's story from here. And they'll kind of do the normal thing, the rising action, the climax, and the finale. This is kind of the normal story arc and the story flow that you'll watch in movies. And it's all done from this sort of spotlight of the main character. And this is where it comes into play, where you'll have, this is kind of your Batmans, a lot of the superhero stories will follow this sort of track where it's very much main character focused. Again, nothing is bad, nothing is necessarily good. It just depends on how well you do it or how well you don't from there. Because with this, there is a question of focus. How do you flesh out the world? How do you flesh out the other characters? Because it's this idea, when you have one character on screen and he's talking, then nobody else can talk. And if it's your main character, you want them to talk a lot, but that means that you don't have a whole lot of time for side characters from there. And this is the reason why, for like a lot of these superhero stories, or these stories which are carried by the one man or the one woman or something like that, the villain actually is, of course, the next character that gets the most amount of screen time or page time or anything like that from there, because this is the most developed character, basically second from there. And this is the way you can kind of reflect, because again, this moral lens, when you have somebody who's doing something good and somebody who's doing something bad, you got to have a character to do it. You have to do this, and you have this reaction and this reflection and contrast between the two is where we begin to see the story come out from there. And so what you end up with is, this is the reason why a lot of these stories, you have to have such a good and dynamic villain. This is something where you really have to flesh this out. But then what you end up with is this ends up with stories where there's a lot of worlds or aspects that are rather narrow. And I say narrow usually has a very negative connotation, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that there's not a whole lot in Batman's world happening outside of Gotham. It's very, focused to this one area. From here, it's the characters, you do have your supporting characters, but there's not necessarily a world built up in the Batman. Now, I know in the comic book universe, you could say there's a world, but specifically if we're talking like the Christopher Nolan Batmans from here, there's not really a world that we ever really imagine outside of Gotham. We are very much focused on just this, because it's very much a narrow lens, which is great. That's what your story you're trying to tell. But there's a different aspect you can run into, and from here, and so this aspect for the story that I kind of think, it's almost like an 80-20 in terms of focus. So the main character and the villain, if you want to count them as kind of one unit, are usually get 80%, and then this is for the side characters. This is how much screen time, focus, point of view, story distribution, anything like that comes into play, is this whole 80-20. 80% from here, 20% from there. But what you can have is you can have stories which really don't necessarily do this, because what you're doing with this is we're trying to emphasize the superhero aspect. This is the hero man, the Jason Bourne character who's going to go do the deed, solve the things, rescue whatever from there. And this is why you need this focus, because we need to prove to the audience and build them up as this super character from here. But let's say you're not going for that. Let's say you're going for something different. And this is where we can see this come into play with Andor, because this is not going to be an exact rule, but this is how I see it a lot more, is more of a 40 and then a 20 and then a 20 and then a 20 and then a 20 from there. This is supposed to equal 100, so we'll X out that one. Equals math. And we'll put S on there for anyone outside in the old kingdom of the Commonwealth, the old Commonwealth. From there, you get your maths. From here, and so what you have is this is your split time in terms of 40% is Cassian, and then maybe we'll have Luthen, we'll have Vel, we'll have all these different side characters, because what we're doing then is this idea of the world. The world doesn't of America or anything else doesn't really exist outside Gotham, because the story is 100% focused on this. It's very much a narrow. So now let's compare this to something like probably my favorite and probably most people's favorite from here is Lord of the Rings from here. And this is something that Lord of the Rings does so good. What they have is they have characters who are able to jump up and completely take over the spotlight from here. They're able to show off that they can do something. And what this does is it inevitably takes away from the main character. You can really only have one hero in a scene. It's most effective to have one hero. So if you have a hero who's not the main character, then it's got to be somebody else. And the question is that good? Is that bad? It depends on the story that you're building towards. And this is where we get to, I was watching more of Andor and getting specifically into the prison arc. And what you have for this arc is you have this character who's a really, really great character. I absolutely loved him because he's not amazing or unique necessarily. He's just really solid. He's really, really solid from there. It's Kino Loy, I believe. And this is Andy Serkis. So, hey, there's your tie-in. After Gollum, he grew up and went to prison in the future. From there, and Kino Loy, what we are introduced to him is Cassian gets locked up very much unjustly, and we see the after effects from Deidre Mira's laws, this crackdown, this really cruel crackdown on everything, and he gets sentenced to 6 years from here. And he ends up and he discovers that he's going to this, this purgatory, white oblivion of a prison. And in this prison, he's looking around, and there's like seemingly no way out because the floors, they're barefoot. They have, little bitty bare feet from here, and then that just electrocutes them if you step when the prison guards turn something on. And so there's this continual just sequence of no hope from here. Now, how are you going to get out? How are you going to get out? You can't get out. You can't get out. You can't get out. How are you going to get out? You can't. From here. And so we're building this up as Cassian's been introduced, and he's going around, and they're saying this is your cell. It's this little bitty from here. Here's your bed. Here's your feeding tube, and you'll sleep here, and then you'll work 12 hours a day, and then you'll sleep, and you really can't fraternize with too many people, and then you'll repeat times 365 times 6. This is your sentence. This is this just completely mind-controlling, mind-numbing sort of environment. And all this does really good job of building up the empire. This is an empire of evil. This is what you want for your empires. You want to have these structures and these things in place, because what you want is you want to have a good villain. An awesome villain who is defeated means that the hero must be, even more awesome from here. And that's something you want to have, because if your villain is lame, then it's not that big of a victory. You want to build up your villain so that way the victory becomes even greater, even more from there. And so Cassian begins adjusting to prison life, and he's introduced to his floor. And this is where we introduce to Kino Loy. He is the floor manager. And as the floor manager, he is one of the other prisoners. This is the unique aspect about him. So he's immediately seen, it's kind of a traitor almost, you could argue to some degree, but you understand where he's coming from, because he's got like less than 1 year left. I actually don't know how to do anything in regards to math, so I'm just going to do that. 1 year left. And what this means is that he's so close to getting out. He's so close to escaping. And he's going to make sure that everyone obeys, everyone follows the rules, nobody tries to escape, nobody does anything stupid from here. And what we're developing is we're developing kind of, this antagonist character from here. He's going to make sure that everything runs shipshape. He's working for the Empire from here. And he's guiding and driving the prisoners to success from here, and he's controlling them, and he's doing this because he wants to make sure nobody ruins it and he can get out from here. And so what we have is we have this brutal efficiency again of the Empire. What do you do if you don't have enough people? You turn the prisoners against themselves. And so what we have is we start introducing him as a character, and he really starts off and is introduced as kind of an antagonist. He's not like a hard antagonist because he himself, he does care for people. From here, he's very, very efficient. He continually pushes them, but he's not on Cassian's side because Cassian is constantly looking and prodding and studying. There's this whole sequence for probably, episodes, I think 7, 8 and into 7 and 8 mainly, where Cassian's looking for ways out. He's trying to find a way out, and every single time he can't seem to make anything. He's just feeling it out, trying to pushing and prodding and finding the ways, and every single way Kino is just shuts them down from there. He's kind of like, nope, not interested, we're not doing this, and Cassian's like, something's up, something's going on. And so what we have is this sort of thing begins to build. We have this idea where we're showing in the prison, we're showing a lot, Cassian, for the prison arc, is sharing the spotlight from here. It's not just all about Cassian coming up with everything. He's making the plans, he's digging the tunnels, he's doing all of this stuff. He's working alongside. He's just one of the other men. He's one of the others from there. There is no real spotlight, I'm going to save the day moment. What he is he's just another guy, and he's blending in. And this is reinforced by the fact that the whole Empire is hunting after him, but they don't even know who he is. They don't even realize that they've got him. So this is this kind of this blind empire of machine of evil that's kind of acting out as this, with all this efficiency that's keeping everyone completely and hopelessly, completely contained in here. And so this is this idea where we're sharing this spotlight with all the other characters, and we're giving them time to develop. And another aspect, which I'll probably talk in another video at some point, is the reason why you invest in side characters from here is because they can die. The TV show is called Andor. I'm pretty sure Cassian is not going to die. I'm pretty sure he's going to make it out of here alive, which means now the tense situations may be tense. He may lose people. This is what you do is anytime Cassian is in a struggle, you can have this idea where, okay, we don't want him to lose these people around him. So that's where your tension and, your suspense comes from. But it still means your side characters can die. Look at the heist arc that we talked about in another one. You have this heist arc where basically everyone dies, except for Vel and Cassian from here. And so this is another reason why you want to it really pays off to invest in these side characters from here, is because you can really create these tense situations with these side characters from here. So this is the reason why they spend really great time. This is the strength of Andor, is in its side characters. From the old guy, who's the prisoner, who's working alongside Cassian from here. And what they're doing is, they're working alongside day by day, building these weird little hex claw things. And nobody really knows what they're for, and they're putting them together, and then they stack them up from here times 80 or whatever from there. And day in and day out, this is happening, and what they do is finally something happens on another floor. They're looking across, at this far off, distant pathway, and over here you can see the prisoners in the distance, and they're doing sign language across to the guys over here, which is our guys from here, and they're trying to figure out something goes on, and they're trying to figure out what's, and Kino shuts them down. He's like, fall in line, on program, and it's this whole thing. This is another thing, world building thing that I love, is the slang, the jargon. All of this comes into play. This is one thing where you don't really realize it's gone until it's kind of pointed out, and this is what makes worlds feel real in this regard, is if you can incorporate this into where it sounds natural. If it doesn't sound natural, it's almost worse than having it at all from there. And so they're constantly trying to look and try and figure out what's happening, because they know something is happening from here. And what we're doing is we're building this up, and we're building up Kino, because this is an aspect is every time Cassian is trying to push out and push, Kino's shutting him down. So what we're doing is we're building him into more and more of an antagonist sort of deal, because we know there's good in him. We know he does seem to kind of care. He's not one of them. He is a prisoner, but he won't do this. And so this is this question, because he's the boss. What are you going to do? What are you going to do with him? And this is where we get this interesting story aspect that's coming to play, because there's a twist, not quite a twist. There's a flip that comes into play in the story later on, and that's what we're building towards. We're building toward this flip, because you see, Cassian has no illusions that he's not in charge. And this is where, when you have these moments where they're trying to figure out, he is continually pushing Kino. He's trying to recruit him. He's trying to pull him in and convince him to his side. He's not trying to challenge him for leadership. This would have been the Macho Man sort of plot in the 80s and 90s action movies or something like that, is there can only be one boss in here, and what you got to do is you got to kill or beat the other boss, and this is it. But no, Cassian is trying to work with him. He's trying to convince him, because he knows Kino's in charge. He's the floor manager, and he has this charisma. He has this authority over the other men that they listen to. And this comes into play as we're building up. And what happens then is one of the old guys, then in this hallway, in a different hallway, but a hallway that we'll use, looks very much like this for illustrative purposes, he starts dying. He starts having a stroke from here. And they call a doctor, and the doctor comes in, and Cassian is asking him, he's like, what happened on the second level? And the doctor tells them, he then asks the guard, telling him, hey, where are they with the with the gurney? And then the guard leaves. And so now it's just Cassian and Kino and the doctor from here. And he's like, what happened on the second level? And he's like, a man who has been freed was put back on the level. And they're like, what do you mean? He was freed. His sentence was up. He should have been let out. He should have been free. And they're like, no, he was sent back. And when the other prisoners found out, they killed everyone. They killed over 100 men to keep the secret in. And Cassian starts pushing now. He starts pushing from here. Because he knows, what is the one reason why Kino's got such an iron grip on everyone like this? Because he's got 1 year left. Because he wants to get out. And this is another thing that I appreciate is, with Andor, that it does so good, is it's so efficient with the stories, is it could go into like 30 minutes about Kino's backstory or anything like that. It doesn't. It just leaves it a mystery. And I actually really like that from there. Because despite the fact that Kino's an interesting character, I don't really want a huge amount of backstory. I want to find out what's happening now. And so what they have is they have this built up. And what you have is then on the second level. And this is when they decide to act. Cassian finally gets through to him and pushes him. Because still, think of this. Cassian's not pushing for the spotlight. He's not pushing for, I'm going to do this. I'm going to lead this or anything like that. What he's pushing for is another character to take the spotlight. He wants Kino to take it because the men listen to him, because he can lead them, this whole aspect from here. And this is where they begin to enact on it. They have a chance. There's a new prisoner brought in, and they begin to act because Cassian breaks the water line, which then floods the floor, and as the guards are lowering the little elevator to go down here, they've been watching it to figure out where it's electrocuted and what's not, and then they begin to attack because they know there's very few guards. And this is another thing. This is great world building. Why are there few guards? This is the question you have to answer, because otherwise your villain seems dumb. Why is it? Well, budget cuts. Okay, well, that's it. But they're using prisoners to control it. This is why they're able to do this, because it works. This whole efficiency program, the floor zapping everything, the boots that keep you safe, all of this is coming into play, and it explains why you can have a competent villain without having many guards. You have to explain why the villains fail, and it has to be legitimate, or else they seem dumb, and nobody gets points for being a dumb villain. And so the elevator comes down, and then the guards, and they attack, and then side characters who we've invested in die, and it's like all this great action sequence, and they're pushing, and they finally get up, they get the guns, and they start overtaking the guards.
Wherever you are, right now, get up. Stop the work. Get out of your cells. Take charge and start climbing.
And this is again where Cassian has this chance, has this moment to take the spotlight. And he refuses. He pushes Kino. He says, you have to do this. You know, they take over the command center from here, and they're running around and running around and, you know, they're securing everything, and the other people are grabbing the guns and running all over the place. And Cassian says, you have to do this. You have to do this. You have to do this. And Kino finally does. And he gets up and takes the microphone.
Is that the best you got?
All the floors are cold. We go alone. We know that no one outside here knows what's happening. And now we know that when they say we are being released, we are being transferred to some other prison to go and die. And that ends today. There is one way out. Right now. The building is ours. You need to run, climb, kill. Get out. One way out. One way out. One way out. Let's get out of here.
And he gives this speech, and it's this great speech because it's like it just unites everyone behind it. And it's this amazing thing because what are you doing? You're not letting Cassian be the hero per se. He's a spy. He's the side character in this show of the prison arc from here. But what you're doing is you're making this world just incredibly widespread because you're allowing side characters to be so deep and so well thought out and so heroic. What this does is it means that anywhere in the galaxy there could be heroes out there. No one else is, not the whole world is not waiting on Cassian, the main character, for things to happen. It's this idea. There's a world outside of Gotham where stuff is happening. There's a world outside where other things are happening. This is the reason why Lord of the Rings was so good as a kid. I was looking at these maps, with the little bitty mountains that he draws that look so cool, and little bit trees and Mirkwood and everything like that. And I'm looking over at Rune and the Blue Mountains and the Haradrim and Umbar. I'm looking at all these other places in the world, wondering and knowing that there's this amazing world out there. Because Lord of the Rings does this, where they'll bring in side characters. Like they have this guy who's a tree, and he's got a beard, and he not single-handedly, he takes down the strongest wizard in Middle-earth and just completely obliterates him and destroys him. And it's like, yeah, this is our side character. Bam. And what does that do for your world? It means that it's so deep and so rich and so vast that you can have side characters who can be the hero from here. And this is what we're doing with Kino. We're letting him have this amazing moment because that way the world just seems so much bigger, so much greater at that point. And when you can do that. The other thing is, from a story standpoint, is Kino can disappear and he can just show up later and we can use him again. We can build off of this character. But the other thing we're doing is, when I told you, we're building him up as an antagonist this whole time, and he's not really an antagonist, but you build him up as an antagonist, and then suddenly once Cassian is able to get through to him and he listens and see what's happening, all that strength and all that power he wielded as an antagonist, he now becomes a protagonist, a good guy. He's on the good side from here, and this is great twist moment where we have this antagonist is now on our side, and there's nothing that can stop us, and we can break out of prison and escape from here. And it's this great, great moment from here. And it all stems from sharing the spotlight, not letting the main character hog the spotlight from here. And it's just such a good character. And this is why Kino, he's a great character. I absolutely loved him. I think he was just so good. And I think this is what Andor does so well, is it really, really invests, because they're trying to make the world seem vast and huge and large and all that stuff. And just really, really deep from there. So I think I've got a few more Andor videos in here and got a few others. But yeah. Give the video a like. It actually really, really does help out smaller channels like this and small videos. They kind of live and die by the algorithm largely. So if you enjoyed it, please do give it a like. And if you'd like to see me talk or look into other shows or books, please list them in the comments below. Thanks.